Croeso Sianel Blaid Llwyd. Yes, it's been a while, but we're back at the Minotaur Hotel. Now we're getting towards the end of this build, version 0.4. I'd expected to get it done in this video, but it actually took quite a lot longer than I expected. So there's a couple of bits still left over, which we'll get to sometime. But I hope you enjoy what we're going to have here. Of course, Minotaur Hotel is mainly brought to you by the team behind it, who are doing a great job, but also in part thanks to Leems, Tiger Cub, Mr. Beaver 11, Rusty Alvarado, Gunnar Muller, Dissonance, Evan King, Grizz, Samuto, The Beholder, David Taylor, Popot, Anubis Silverwind, Brandon Bradford, and Idare Corval, who are all my top patrons, and I appreciate what they do, and them and all the patrons, of course. And by the way, stay tuned after the story ends. I have a little extra something a couple of people have asked about, so you'll be seeing something there. But for now, let's just get into Chapter 13, Little Stars. A night rages, and she is only for a short while. Time always takes his due. Still they had no grief at all. They danced and drank, laughed and sang until their voices grew hoarse and eyes dimmed. And further they celebrated, as if somehow a victory could be made eternal if it burned bright enough. Sitting at the sidelines of the lounge, surrounded by mankind but locked inside his mind, the Minotaur lost himself in thought. Such a human thing. Did the guests and the master perhaps know it? The archaic ritual taught by his old friend? Celebrate and live for a whole night. Do not cease until your back burns out all its weight, and in no circumstance allow the bonfire to go out. Then take a handful of embers, greyed and crumbling on the outside, but still harbouring a red heart. Pour a stream of your finest wine, saved from the festivities, to kill the night's fire. Old Phronios swore he overheard it during a priestess's initiation when she was instructed on the mysteries of Crete's old goddess. That ritual, he said, could make a moment everlasting. It would leave demons behind, a memory of the night etched on the land and lodged in the mind of its witnesses. He said the ember's last thread of smoke would be gathered by prayers, Zeus's daughters, and brought to the Graces or the Fates or the Hours for their weaving. The more he explained, the looser his conception of the ceremony became. What silly nonsense, Asterion thought then, back in Crete. He is just saying it to cheer me up again. But the Minotaur did steal a cup of his father's wine, and together they drowned the embers, hand-picked from the basin in the courtyard where the bonfire had raged. He never believed such a ritual could work. He knew a handful of mysteries himself, and none were as simple, as innocent as that. Even in their kindest moments, the old gods charged in blood. But still he did it, because regardless of the gods, it made nights unforgettable in his mind. Sometimes raw belief, lacking in any form of binding magic, is enough to make something true. That was long ago. He had witnessed so many festivities in all these centuries as the hotel's keeper. Each one pushed him further towards believing that Phronios' ritual was merely a manifestation of humanity's drive to find immortality. It is only human to seek eternity, the exquisite lie that the flow of time can be stopped, trapping oneself in a bubble no tragedy can burst. Phronios wished for that mercy in Crete thousands of years ago, and humanity yearns for it still. Believing in such old rituals, from a time whose very gods have gone missing. Silly nonsense, bland indulgence. Still, that night after the concert, the Minotaur went to bed with his hands covered in ashes. What an exquisite time they had. The fatigue of it all was catching up to him. A tension in his chest made the room spin around him. His fingertips were freezing. He did not notice when it happened, but pulling a single lungful of air became a laborious task. Asterion knew this too well. Time, after all, demands his due, and for every joy a greater sorrow is sure to follow. He drew a breath. A prisoner such as him was not allowed happiness. His mind told him this even as he remembered the pleasantness of the evening. He drew a breath. He forgot that he was meaning to sleep, forgot to close his eyes. The Minotaur stared at the ceiling as thoughts became half-thoughts, and the tightness in his chest became a heaviness in his shoulders and a tension in his hands. He drew a breath. A price must be paid. There is always a catch. The sheets around him bunched up into valleys and peaks. Disquiet fought against the weariness. He drew a breath. Restless sleep overtook him while he felt too heavy to move. A sullen tiredness in mind, deeper than sleep, pulled him into the valley of his sheets. Whispers about his nature, words he had not allowed himself to mutter for nearly a century now. But another memory fluttered, that of Leo's embrace. The Minotaur's nose on his head, that pacifying warmth they shared. Even this, though, is covered with the worries of... Was it his place to? Was he allowed? Too soon or sudden? Overstepping boundaries? He, always unwanted, now... Morning cracked his skull open, but no dream slipped out in a sprint. The bedroom seemed just the same as it always had been. So cramped it threatened to crush him, walls so white they burned his eyes, and shelves decorated with Jean-Marie's bug-eyed carvings. He remembered to breathe, then bit his tongue. The pain came without hurry, dull and throbbing. But the Minotaur's eyes felt different, as if overnight they skipped autumn and dove into winter. If the mind were a muscle, his would be hobbling about, arching with overwork. Asterion told himself to look to the door, but didn't. Stared up, told himself to look toward the door frame. Remember to breathe, prayed the hybrid. He drew a breath. Told himself to get up, but didn't. He clenched his hands, felt nails sinking into his palm. There were obsidian hunks tied to his limbs, waist, eyes. Even each fold of his brain was weighed down with hooks. If the gods had sent him a shred of mercy, such a weight could have crushed him entirely and ended his existence. But they made him strong and resilient to bear the load. This vessel was not made to break, he knew, even if the creatures of this realm were so eager to try. The only movement made as he finally drew his eyes to the side was nameless clenching and unclenching of hands. There had been many times over his everlasting existence when Asterion's spirit had felt emptied of vigour or substance like this. At least a handful of times per year for the last 2 millennia, without fail, although time became mushier inside the cold room. But it had not always been the case. He couldn't afford such bland indulgence when monsters chased him. Perhaps it was a jest from the gods themselves. He remembered to breathe. When a human came who sought to end his trials, yet another punishment came, this time from his own mind. But enough dawdling, little star. You must rise again regardless. There is a delay between commanding his body to move and having it muster the will to obey. He pushes himself up with the clumsiness of a marionette, willing against an inertia in his brain. There is an amount of breathing room between each limb's movement to get himself up, as if all the force gained from a night of sleep is required. He gazes at the mirror. Welcome back to your old self, little star. Are you ready to see the internet? Witness the latest creation of human ingenuity. They never stop, these sharp-eyed humans. What intricate creations their fine fingers craft. Asterion looked at his own hand, at the knobbly knuckles and thick nails, each knot tied with rough, ragged rope. Yes, of course. Great. This is a tablet. It's a kind of computer that uses touch controls. By which I mean you just tap on the screen. It's very intuitive. I can't see anything. Am I doing it wrong? No, it's fine. I haven't unlocked it yet. Here, I just press this button and... I took the liberty of setting it up for you. Knowing you have a hard time with fine movements, I made sure things would be big and easy to tap. You think these are large enough? I can expand the icons more still. Thank you, sir. This is adequate. Although, I hope I didn't impose on you a chore. Was setting it up difficult? Not at all. Tablets all come with accessibility settings. Tailoring it to your needs is a trivial matter. Accessibility. Only humans could fathom such a thing. The gods had no love or care for Hephaestus and his imperfections. Oh, that is very kind of them, thinking about the disgracefully uncoordinated like me. The man looks down to the hybrid. Asterion gazes at his eyes. He never understood why people had such a fascination for the colour of each other's irises. To him, the white surrounding them was much more enthralling. Nature had been kind to him in that regard, at least. Rather than the beady blackness of a cow's eyes, he'd been blessed with a fine pair of very human ones, whites and all. Perhaps it was something in the way Leo's eyes hesitated as he searched for words, or maybe it was the Minotaur's brain slipping up for a second. But before Leo could speak, the Minotaur felt a few centuries' worth of age lifting from his back. I wouldn't put it like that. Lots of people have injuries or special needs, but regardless of that, everyone gets old someday. We'll all need the help. He chewed on it. The tone was kind. The master spoke almost like singing, but as the words were sewed together, they became thorny. Asterion bit his tongue. Was he old? Or perhaps old in the same sense that a human could be? His body was the best it had been in 80 years, but all that time spent in the cold room never left him as tired as this. It was the kind of exhaustion that made even opening one's eyes an insurmountable task. Old or crippled, the Minotaur needed this accessibility invention. Do I have special needs, or am I just old? Asterion mumbled it. His tongue felt bloated today. He had to grind his teeth to stop it from peeking out of his mouth. The master could not distinguish what he said. Sorry, what did you say? Moo. The master's eyes scrutinize him. They appreciate every feature of his face as if trying to glimpse into the Minotaur's mind. His heart skips a beat. Will he realize how disposable a toy Asterion is? The hybrid cannot say what will come next. It must be better than this feeling of being suspended and awaiting for trial. Are you feeling well, Asterion? You seem a bit distressed today. Asterion looks away and draws a breath. His chest tightens and he opens his mouth. Leaves it hanging, in fact, as what he meant to say escapes him. He blinks, lets his eyelids fall as he exhales. It's so hard thinking with all these hooks on his brain. He has to string every word together, then break it all down into mouth movements, exhales and inhales, glances and hand gestures. And a delay is there, making it all worse. A gap as the sea is deep and just as dark. When he closes his eyes and allows himself to dream, images flow like water from a spring. The master felt warm last night. Herculean was not the trial the Minotaur expected. His mind went silent as they stayed locked together in the dark. Asterion nuzzled his nose on the top of Leo's head. He did not recoil. While it lasted, Asterion did not think of how awkward his hands could be, closing all of its fingers together. It stopped being an uncoordinated claw. It became just a hand. When he readjusted his legs, he didn't even hear the clop of his hooves. All the noises eating away at the edges quieted down, muffled by velvet. The master was generous. He went through great lengths to get the wine. And what did he gain from it? Asterion bites his tongue. Perhaps some more trust is warranted. The Minotaur opened his mouth and drew a breath. The images sprung forth and words chained themselves together. By the gods, I should tell him that it feels like I'm turning to stone. Leo must know what it means and what I should do. Asterion? But there must be a catch to him. There always is one. Are you okay? But regardless, he's not unkind. If I am to serve him to perform his duty well, perhaps he knows how I can be made better. I should tell him. A hand warms the Minotaur's forearm. You don't seem too well. The Minotaur looks up to the human. His eyes are unmoving, not afraid or sad, but looking through the master, as if trying to focus on his face was too difficult to command. The Minotaur draws a breath and speaks for a kinder part of his mind can take control. Oh, I'm just struggling to wake up. Oh, it's true, we haven't eaten anything yet. How about I teach you some of the basics and then I go down to get last night's leftovers? I hid some of the appetizers in the lounge's fridge. Asterion grunts, not really listening, just asserting his vague and ever-present agreement whatever the master has to say. Okay, so just recapping. With a computer we can access the internet and find all sorts of fun stuff. Do you remember what the internet is? A question. Asterion's eyes shift. The internet. Yes. Pull the string. Pull the words from your mind and speak. It's a way to get knowledge very quickly. It would take months for a book or letter to be delivered, but with the internet it won't take long. Did I get it right? Yep, let's start then. Now, I want you to tap on that icon in the top left corner. Could you do that for me? Just tap it with a finger. That's right. There's no mystery to it. Just tap, tap. Okay, like this. So, what do you want to search first? I don't know. How do I tell it what I want to know? Just tap here in this little white bar. Now the keyboard will pop up. These symbols, are they normal? What do you mean? The keyboard should show the alphabet. It's nothing out of the ordinary. Oh, no, I think I broke it. What? No way, you haven't done anything wrong. Is my finger bad? Did I touch it wrong? The screen looks normal to me. The Minotaur glares at the screen, trying to make sense of all the symbols. What odd lines they are. They do awaken a sense of familiarity. His brain itches as it struggles to connect together an ancient mind with more recent knowledge. His ears flick. He hears a racket of metal mechanisms tick-tacking and reeing down at the cramped bedrock. It was coming to him. The name of the machine. A writer. A typewriter. They had been such an issue. The letters themselves had no meaning, no soul behind them. The hotel's translation could do nothing to impose order. During all the millennia, the Minotaur had spoken the language of his people, without care to learn whatever new tongue was the fad at the time. Although, to be more precise, for a good few centuries he had evolved into the habit of making new words, so much so that his old Minoan had become quite unlike what he spoke as a child. But it all changed when typewriters were invented. The letters alone eluded him. He had to learn other languages and alphabets then. Ah, this is a typewriter. The hotel doesn't like them. Huh? Why is that? It only understands meaning and words, not what they are made of. It all breaks down. Oh. Is there something I can do then? I could read and type for you. It won't be an issue. He drew a breath. The more he looked at the alphabet, how similar it was to what the Greeks invented, the less he felt the hooks on his brain. Well, I can remember the letters, the words too. He tapped the screen. He meant to press the O but tapped the P instead. An old annoyance. Simpler days returned to his mind when Jean-Marie was still alive and they were drafting contracts down at the bedrock. He never mastered the typewriter, but he's decent enough to use it, slowly. He could conquer it again. I can face this. Leo continues staring at the Minotaur. Is that a twinge of worry? Then it grows soft. His voice, as soon as it comes out, sounds like velvet. Of course you can. You've kept this hotel running for so long. Memorizing an alphabet won't be hard for you. Excuse me, what did you say? You've kept this place up and running, right? Masters came and went, but you were the constant. You're very competent and hard-working, that's clear to me. Hard-working. The gods had made him strong enough to carry a load no regular man could. He was a beast of burden. Yes, Asterion could take pride in that. You deal with the guests, manage check-ins and check-outs, repair the bedrooms, even cook if necessary. And last night you went as far as providing entertainment. We've just reopened the hotel and it's already doing so well, in no small part thanks to you. Is memorizing an alphabet a difficult task for someone as quick-witted as you? The hotel is doing well, the Minotaur thought. You know, the context, bitter thoughts would pop into his mind. No, the hotel is still a shell of its former self. We're only housing a dozen or two guests. We barely have any staff. When it came to this subject, his mind was unclouded. Yes, the hotel was doing well. Repairing such a big place in less than 2 weeks was nothing short of a miracle. Guests coming around now won't even imagine the place had been left in ruins for 80 years. This was his one good thing. Whatever violence and disgrace the gods saw fit to impose on him came twofold as blessings for his home. He would serve well if it meant the prosperity of his one good thing. I am proud of the hotel. The Minotaur's voice rumbled, followed by a harsh snort and flicker of his ears. As you well should. Is that an order? Consider it a friend's suggestion and a partner's recommendation. Partner? Partner. What a peculiar word. Asterion glanced to the side. He had to string every command together. He could feel his eyeballs dragging inside their sockets. He drew a breath, then dug his nails on the palms of his hands. Partner. Phronios used to call him that back in Crete, all the way until that night. A white bird flying off into the moonlight. The Minotaur aimed his bow and drew the string. It was not too different from plucking his lyre. That last tension before letting go. For Phronios, for that everlasting friend, but first of all for his brother, intrepid Androgeus, he set the arrow loose. Partner. They were hunting together that night. By the end of it, Phronios called him something else, and that was the last they saw of each other. But at times it felt like this master was Phronios, or Androgeos' ghost given flesh. They all had such honey tongues. We are business partners, aren't we? We're in this together. Asterion returned from his haze. I'm afraid that is not something the hotel or the valley would ever be willing to recognize. My sentence, after all. Contracts to stray too far from treating me as a prisoner would be ineffective. What do you mean by that exactly? The master can command the realm to do his bidding, but there are rules and principles that stand above. If you try to pass a contract or command that disregards them, your order will not become binding. The same way you cannot summon currency, you can't sign an order saying I am your equal. That would be against the labyrinth's principles. So, I can't be your business partner. As far as the labyrinth is concerned, that is just not possible. Leo looks off to the side, lost in thought. Who knows? Maybe I can find a way to circumvent this. I think I'm getting the hang of how this realm works. We could try finding a loophole we can use to achieve the same effect. Perhaps something to the effect of forbidding the master from harming you. What bold ideas. The Minotaur feels the hummingbirds pricking at the back of his skull. He grits his teeth and Leo notices. But it would seem we got sidetracked. I was supposed to show you the internet. Yes, sir. So, tap here. We can begin with a few searches. I'm sure there's a lot you want to know about the outside world. Again, the peculiar alphabet popped on the screen. This time, however, it was stringed into stubborn words that didn't bend to the realm's translation. But they weren't unfamiliar. Memory sparked, loose strings tied into knots. The hotel's translation isn't working. That's weird. I can read it just fine. Although I suppose it's because I already speak English, I wouldn't notice anything going wrong. Is this an issue? English? No, I can read it. I learned it after we started using typewriters. I can read it. I'll just need a minute to familiarize myself. Yeah. What language have you been speaking so far? My language. What does that mean? It's my language. It was Cretan. It used to be. But with time if everything gets translated, then I could tinker with it and make it my own. I had a hard time with certain sounds, so I just changed it, made it however it felt right. So, it used to be Minoan, but it's not anymore. It's my language. My language. Rough, bullish lips bending in odd angles, a tongue too long and thick. During the day, his wet nurse taught him the words, repeating each one 100 times. A prince must speak well, she said. Every other week, his mother would spend a night with him. Her eyes wandered, crawled up the ceiling, and her little limp-wristed hands grasped about like a baby's. She spoke as if her mouth was always full of pebbles. Her syllables would blur together, the vowels stuttered and were washed away by her accent. Father said it was her madness speaking. The wet nurse said she came from a godly place beyond the sea, and that was their accent. Asterion drank every precious moment with his mother, including her slurred song. He could never tell if his accent came from his bestial form or from her influence. But here in the labyrinth he let it go, took bits and pieces from people over the centuries, stitched together something rough, shoddy, and perfect. I made my own language. I see. I wasn't expecting that. But can you read English just fine? If not, I can help you. Master shouldn't worry. Yes, I'm remembering. Now, what should I do next? We can start by searching for something you want to know. Try typing it. What you're curious about. Yes, sir. To take a glimpse of the outside world. A few things did come to mind. He thought about them so much during these decades. I wonder how Crete is doing nowadays. The Palace of Knossos was discovered in the late 1800s and excavated in the early 1900s. So, they found it. So little of it is left, but that's it. It's where I grew up. This courtyard. When I was a child, I used to play here with my brother Androgios. How was it, living back then? It was nice, I suppose. If you're wondering about all the modern comforts, running water, electricity, we didn't have any of that. But we lived well, better than most. I even had a room of my own. I know few children from that time could say the same. I had a bodyguard to keep me safe, which stuck together always. Although that may not be the best way to put it. He was only some 7 years older than me when he became my, shall we say, guardian. I must have been 4 years old. My time in the palace was quite enjoyable, in no small part thanks to him. His name was Phronios. But make no mistake, I did have responsibilities. I perform ceremonial duties very often. Ronios always gave me company, and Rodios would too when his obligations allowed. I wonder what else I can find in this internet. Before the master can stop him, the Minotaur types Notre Cathedral. A chill runs up the man's spine just as the Minotaur's stomach drops. I'm sorry, I should have given you a heads up about this. Asterion's ears droop as he reads on. This is a tragedy. It is. They're going to restore it, but it's still horrible. You can still look at plenty of archive footage and pictures of Notre Dame, though. Most historical buildings like it are well preserved and documented digitally. The master shows him the image search results. You mentioned Jean-Marie had made drawings of the building from memory. Do they do justice to the real thing? More pictures of the cathedral are revealed, but every other image result is news footage of the burning cathedral. Oh, it's strange. You'd expect me to not care much about something that's completely beyond my grasp. Even if it had not burned down, it remains off limits to me. In a way, it is off limits to other people as well. I'm sharing a little part of my burden with them, and that's not something I enjoy. The Minotaur sulks in silence for a minute or two, and the master gives him space. He considers whether showing Asterion a virtual tour would change his mind, but decides not to keep picking at his wound. I'm sorry for bringing down the mood, Master. I'd rather not dwell on this subject any longer. Don't worry about it. Yes, that's a good idea. Anything else you want to look up? There is a place I've been very curious about for quite a while now. Perhaps you have heard of it, the region of Bordeaux. That name rings a bell, yes. Is it a region of France? Yes, I believe it is. Now, what will your internet tell me about it? France's most prominent winemaking region. I suppose Master Jean-Marie was not bragging. His family's wine must have been quite remarkable. It was captured by Germans during World War II. Oh, I suppose that makes sense. But it seems to be doing quite well now. That is a relief. Did Jean-Marie come from this region? Yes, it's what he used to call his ancestral homeland. He was a patriot. No land on earth was as beautiful as noble as his. He couldn't bear to hear of France's situation in the war. No amount of pleading could stop him from going. The Minotaur could still feel it. The ringing inside his head from when Jean-Marie died. And the rest, I suppose, is history. I wonder what it must feel like walking through one of those vineyards. It must be refreshing. Sun on your back, maybe a chilly wind cutting through the grapevines, leaves brushing against your arms. I could use some of that. We could make one then. How about it? Our very own vineyard. What? But why? Because I can just make things pop into existence. Why not use it for something fun and nice like that? Ah, my good lord. If only things were so simple. It would be quite the tricky affair, I'm afraid. Why? What's stopping us? Well, contracts, for starters. This land is not hospitable for life. Plus, that would distract us too much from our mission in the hotels, wouldn't it? I suppose you're right. Well, I should not lie. A vineyard would be nice. Who knows? Maybe one day, if it's still your wish. This is a nifty invention, this internet thing. Could it? The silliest idea came to me. Perhaps it's hubris of me to even consider it. The Minotaur's ears flicker, and his snout takes on a livelier shade of pink. Could the internet have something about me? Of course, there's the whole legend about you dating back to who knows when. We can find plenty of stuff. Although... I should warn you in advance. People have many misconceptions. I see. Yes, I cannot say I'm surprised. The Athenians were not kind in their telling of what happened. I've known of that for a long time. Let's see. Asterion of Crete. Oh, there is something here, even if it's all about me. Asterion I became the king of Crete after the death of his father, King Tectomus. After Europa was abducted and taken by Zeus, he married her and became the stepfather to Zeus's sons. Not what I wanted, but this is nice. A shard of my family's history lives. Is that your grandfather? Oh, not exactly. He lived a long time before me. I can't even recall how many generations apart we were. There's not much here. I suppose most of it would be forgotten, but... Further down it says Asterion II, the Minotaur. Let's see what they have about me. The Minotaur's eyes leap from sentence to sentence. Pasiphae, struck by Poseidon's madness, recruited the artisan Daedalus to craft a hollow cow with which she took the bull's lurch. The hybrid child, set of the body of the man and the head of a bull, had no place in the natural order and nothing to sustain it. As such, he grew violent and took to consuming human flesh. King Minos commanded Athens to send youths as tribute to feed him. 7 youths, among which was Theseus, heir to Athens' throne. Ariadne, the Minotaur's sister, became enraptured by the Athenian hero and confided in him the secret that the labyrinth could be conquered with a ball of yarn. With Ariadne's assistance, Theseus solved it and vanquished the Minotaur. He escaped Crete with the princess, abandoned her on the island of Naxos, where it's believed she either met her end or was kidnapped by Dionysus. In the aftermath of the Minotaur's death, Crete fell from its hegemonic position over the Mediterranean. King Minos set out in pursuit of Daedalus, seeking revenge, for he believed it was the craftsman who revealed to Ariadne the secret solutions of the labyrinth. This in turn led to Minos' death, boiled alive in a foreign court. The death of the Minotaur marks the fall of Crete and the rise of Athens as the main power in the Mediterranean. The loss of a centralized ruling figure led to fragmentation, which in turn allowed it to be conquered by different civilizations over the course of history. If you'd like to hear a word of caution, not everything you'll find online is true. I imagine that can be distressing, seeing yourself misrepresented. You're not at all like the legend says. It's outright slander. But we both know better. You're kind, hard-working, and very important to the hotel and to the people here. That's the truth that matters. That said, it might be for the best you don't focus too much on what the internet says about you. There are better things for you to search about. The Minotaur draws a breath, holding himself back from coughing. It's fine. Nothing I didn't know already. The Athenians were not kind in their telling of the tale. We have our own version of the story now. That won't matter. Well, I was thinking of going down to the lounge. If I recall correctly, there are some leftovers from last night we could eat. If you want, you can stay here and keep browsing the internet. Does that sound good? The Minotaur's fingertips were ice cold. His hooves radiated a dull pain that crawled all the way to the top of his horns. He drew a breath. His fingers curled on the device's surface. His ears went numb as a streak of cold sweat ran down his back. Yes, I'll be fine. Thank you, sir. See you soon, Asterion. The Minotaur closed his eyes and recalled it all. The dozens, perhaps hundreds of retellings he had heard across the centuries. Each one more horrible than the previous, so often revolving around that fundamental misinformation that he'd been a cannibal. Such a life-changing lie. And yet, There was something comforting in the simple fact that, cannibalism aside, what he read was exactly what he expected. See you soon, my lord. Once more the sound of your footsteps echoes up and down the stairwell, from the skylight so far above down to the depths below. Each one sounds somehow lonely without the now familiar clopping of Asterion's hooves keeping time with them. There is no low humming, murmuring voice just above and behind your shoulder. No massive body brushing against your side, then pulling away after lingering for the briefest moment. There is no conversation, or even companionable silence. There is just you and the staircase. As you take the steps down, your mind drifts back to the night before, the celebration of the hotel's revival, to Asterion's concert, to the embrace you had shared with the Minotaur before he mounted the stage, and the banter between the two of you while returning to your chambers when the night had grown late. You poke your head into the lobby, checking for any early morning arrivals. When you're met only with silence and solitude, you make your way towards the light and life, as hungover and heavy-headed as it may be, of the lounge. The group of Middle Eastern students are huddled around the same table near the hearth they'd occupied the night before, sharing an animated conversation over steaming cups of coffee. A few of the new arrivals are scattered here and there, still shooting occasional sideways glances towards the serene dragon manning the bar counter. And Coulter himself nods along with Luke's chattering while the Griffin scarfs down his breakfast. So anyway, what do you think? That could be pretty dang fun, huh? Perhaps. Come on, Blue Boy, a little music, a little stargazing. I can make us some snacks. Oh, you never tried pickle pop? Make them big enough, you can lick them pretty much all night long. Was that an innuendo? You want it to be? The Griffin tries to keep a straight face, but struggles as the seconds tick away. He finally bursts into a fit of giggling while Coulter rolls his eyes. Seriously, pretty much everything's a lot more fun when you do it with someone else. No funny business, I promise. Just two men appreciating the beauty of the night sky together. Wouldn't you rather spend the time with one of your trysts? Yeah, stuff like that never lasts as long as you want it to. Luke's gaze grows distant and a wistful sigh escapes his beak. Come on, please. I promise I'll make it worth your while. We can even get Leo and Asterion along for the ride, making a real get-together. What's this about now? The pair looks over to you when you speak up. You move to take the stool next to Luke, and the Griffin wipes his beak with his forearm and greets you with a wide grin. Good morning, Leo. Luke was just telling me about his idea to go stargazing and wished me to join him. Oh, what brought this on? I guess it's been banging around in my brain for a while now. See, a couple of nights ago I was thinking shit over. It's just after I got you, well, you know. He glances over at Coulter and then clears his throat and continues. Anyway, I saw her staring out on the porch playing that harp thing of his. I ended up shooting the shit and he laid some stuff out for me that I think I needed to hear. Well, the stars, man. It's like staring at the face of God. I always loved looking at the stars. I just thought, well, what's better than doing it with some friends? Oh, so we're friends, are we? The Griffin shifts and squirms on his stool with an awkward chuckle. Well, I just thought, you know. Coulter hums, low and rumbling as he crosses his arms and closes his eyes, thinking, considering. I suppose I could use something like that, something to take my mind off of things. But don't misunderstand, Leo, I'm grateful for the work. But running around to serve the guests while trying to figure out where things are disappearing to is more tiring than I'd anticipated. Wait, what's disappearing? Coulter shrugs. It's the strangest thing. It's usually food, but even the utensils aren't entirely safe. I'll set a few trays out, turn around, and find them picked over the moment I look back. Even the cold room has the occasional can or jar going missing. That's really weird. I don't think one of the guests would be sneaking to the kitchen for food when they can just ask to have it served up. Could the hotel be doing it somehow? I don't think so, but I will admit you or Asterion know more than I how all this works. I guess I can ask him. But yeah, if you need a break, this could be good. After everything that's happened over the last few days, I think we could all use it. Alright, it's a plan then. The griffin hops off his stool, stretching his body and lashing his tail in enthusiasm. Oh man, this is going to be great. We can get a few cases of beer out and get some lawn chairs set up and... Luke pauses, grins and looks at you. Hey, think your hotel magic shit could whip up a telescope for us? It's difficult to make complicated objects. You'd have to be able to tell the hotel how. But I think there's some schematics for different machines, telephones, stuff like that down the bedrock. Asterion told me he got everything organised on one of the tables. You could take a look there and see if you can find anything for a telescope. If not, we can get something drawn up. In the bedrock, huh? Luke hems and haws for a long moment. He scratches the underside of his beak, his tail fixed behind him. Alright. You open the way and me and Blueball find those schema chickers in a jiffy. Excuse me? Me? Well, yeah, 2 pairs of eyes will find what we're looking for faster than 1, right? The dragon looks to you and you give him a helpless shrug in return. Luke's right, and even if Code doesn't want to admit it, all 3 of you know it. You're going to pester me until I say yes, aren't you? Yep. In the face of the griffin's shameless smile, Coda can only sigh, shake his head and resign himself to his fate. Very well, I suppose we should make our way down sooner rather than later, yes? Hey, listen, before you do, can I tell you 2 something? You glance around, then gesture to the dragon and griffin in close. It's about Asterion. Is everything alright? I think so, it's just... Coda and Luke wait for you to gather your thoughts. You weigh each word before you speak, trying to decide how much to tell them. How much you have the right to tell them. He's been through a lot. Remember how the hotel was when we were just reopening, right? The dragon nods. His expression is grave as he waits, patient and placid for you to continue. Well, his family has been able to keep the hotel in good shape since the last master abandoned it. When I came around, it was just Asterion here. So he's been through a lot, and things can get difficult for him sometimes. I know we had fun last night, but this morning he might need a little time. Luke nods, then he speaks in a quiet, even tone. It's surprising to hear from the griffin. I can take all the time he needs. We ain't going to force him to come out with us. If he's feeling better by tonight, both he and you are sure welcome to join the fun. Oh, thank you, Luke. The griffin tips you a wink and his heavy paw claps you on the shoulder. Of course, it's the least I can do for you and him. So, shall we? Yes. Right. With that said and done, the 3 of you break your huddle. You open the passage of the bedrock for them, humming just like Asterion taught you. After seeing the griffin and dragon off, you resolve to check in on what else needs to be done. The hotel is alive once more, and it is the master's duty to take care of the guests who pass through its open doors. But first, breakfast. The griffin and dragon make their way down the winding stone hallway. Their footsteps echo in the silence surrounding them, rushing ahead into the labyrinthine depths awaiting the pair. So? Back here again? Silence falls again. A stifling blanket engulfs the pair. Just when it starts to become unbearable, it's broken by a low, reedy, whining sound. Will you stop that? What's the matter now? Don't like my whistling? To be frank, it sounds like someone is strangling a cat. Rude. I ain't scared, you know. I mean, what's there to be scared of? It's just a creepy basement. In a freaky magic hotel. Yes, nothing to be scared of at all. Can you let go of my arm? I think I'm starting to lose. Sorry. Luke's hands jerk away, rising up with palms out while he gives Cotter a sheepish grin. The 2 continue down the passageway. While neither acknowledges it, their shoulders continue to brush together as confirming the other's presence. And then they turn one last corner and stand on the threshold of their destination. When he'd been down there assisting, as much as he could at least, with getting the Wi-Fi to work, Cotter had been able to find distractions from the oppressive wrongness that filled the room. But now there's no one to serve snacks or tea to. No chattering from a certain over-enthusiastic young woman. The feeling clenches like a fist around his old pattering heart. After you. No, please, I insist. After you. That's fine. Ladies first, right? Truly, I beg your pardon. On 3. That would be acceptable. All right, here goes. 1, 2, 3. The Griffin lets out an involuntary squawk as he rushes into the room. He flinches and raises his fist when he hears low, deep rumbling, then realizes that the sound is coming from behind. Notre is still standing at the entrance to the room, hiding a small smile behind his hand. Asshole! Oh, come now, Mr. Walker. Aren't you always the one telling me to lighten up? Luke's beak opens and then falls shut. Opens and then falls shut. The Griffin rubs the back of his head and lets out a quiet laugh. He can't argue with that. Now then, the telescope? Yeah. The Griffin moves towards one of the tables and starts searching through the stacks of documents. You said the ski watch should be over here, right? That's correct. Notre watches Luke rifle through the papers, winces a few drop off the table to scatter on the floor. While the Griffin makes a mess of Asterion's handiwork, the dragon's gaze begins to wander. To the wall of obsidian filling half the room. To the bottomless basin at the centre of the massive chamber. To the pile of instruments along one wall, and to the folders lined up on another nearby table. Contracts. Notre isn't sure at first what draws him to approach and begin flipping through these folders. As he hums to himself, he searches out names, descriptions, anything that might spark a single hint of familiarity. When he'd asked Leo and Asterion, they both said they didn't know of any guest like the man he was searching for. It wasn't like he didn't believe them, but perhaps he was further in the past than Asterion's family could remember. Perhaps Leo, being new and experienced, wouldn't even know where to look in the records. Perhaps it wasn't the Red Dragon, or one of the names Notre had sought out when his journey first began, hiding somewhere within those pages. Perhaps. It was less than unlikely, but the mere possibility was like an insistent itch, and Notre had long ago lost the ability to resist scratching. Wait a moment. Ah! The piercing shriek derails Cotra's train of thought. Then something warm, feathery, and smelling of bacon grease and musk slams into his side and wraps its arms tight around him. Ah! Luke, what are you... Let go of me. There's something over there. The dragon's eyes follow Luke's trembling finger towards a nearby pile of junk. He's about to speak when the sound of pattering feet cuts him off. A shadow moves behind one of the tables. Something breathes in the heavy silence. Notre looks at Luke. Luke looks at Notre. Well, come on then, let's see what it is. Notre edges towards the source of those sounds. Luke, meanwhile, takes a moment to grab a heavy paperweight before following. Slow, careful, quiet. They edge towards whatever's in there with them. Luke looks back at Notre. Notre looks at Luke. Then the dragon nods and the silent count begins. 1, 2, 3. Notre grabs the table and heaves it away from the wall with a loud roar, while Luke surges forward with a predator screeching, his weapon held high. Aye! The little creature flinches and screams, its hiding place is yanked away. The yelp of fear tries to scrabble back into the shelter of the table. Get away! Something slams into Luke's back, wrapping thin arms around the griffin's neck with a high-pitched war cry. Then the pile of junk erupts and the little creature flings itself at Notre. Pandemonium fills the room, grunting and screaming, scratching and scrabbling. Notre stumbles and trips over a thin-limbed body, and Luke staggers and grunts for every blow with tiny fists on the crown of his head. While the two are surprised by their assailants, they are both larger and stronger. Luke reaches to grab the thing clinging to his back. Even as the creature snaps and snarls and squirms in his grip, the griffin manages to pull it off. Notre, meanwhile, rolls on the ground to grab the current little thing that tripped him up in the crook of one arm. The creature that slammed into the dragon's side tries to scamper away, but despite his size, Notre is swift. He surges like a tide to engulf the fleeing foe. The pair finally stand, bruised and must but victorious. Their wriggling opponents let out shrill squeaks of panic as they carried over and set down near the obsidian wall. When little creatures look around for an escape route and see the dragon and griffin box them in, they wail and huddle together while cowering on the floor.
Let us go. We didn't mean it. Please don't hurt us.
The dragon and griffin stare down at the diminutive reptilian beings. Luke takes in the scraps of clothing the trio are wearing. Scavenged, no doubt, while Notre tuts at the sight of their pallid scales and sunken features. It's a dragon who finally sighs and crosses his arms, gazing down the shaking lizards. Hush now, little ones. We'll not hurt you, I promise.
Now that's my aching head.
Notre shoots Luke a look, and the griffin goes back to sulking while rubbing at his bruised noggin. I am Notre, an employee of this hotel. Tell me, are you the ones who have been stealing food from upstairs? After sniffling and wiping his snout, the darker scaled lizard speaks.
Oh, we had to. We'd been starving for so long, and we won't do it again, honest. Just let us go, and...
The lizard looks up at Notre and trails off. His yellow eyes peer at the looming male for a long moment, then grow wide.
Dragon?
The two lizards fall silent as if the word was a flip switch. They too lift their heads to look at Notre, and the same expression of awe spread on their darker scaled companion's face lights theirs up as well.
Dragon? Is it really a dragon? It is, it's a dragon.
The three lizards chirp with delight, and their snouts split open in wide, toothy, beaming grins.
A dragon! A dragon! We finally found a dragon! Wait, that means we...
Blinking eyes widen in realization then horror, the trio throws themselves down to the ground at Cotra's feet and clings to the dragon's ankles.
Oh, it's sorry, we didn't know.
Really, it's all right. Peace, little ones, peace. Notre looks from the whimpering lizards over to Luke, his own expression dumbfounded. He murmurs vague consolation to the trio while bending down to give them gentle pats between their horns.
So, what are these guys?
I believe I have an idea. Regardless, they aren't a threat. In fact, it seems they're as much in need of shelter as any other guest at the hotel.
Yeah. In that case, guess we should tell Leo and Asterion about them.
The mention of the Minotaur's name, Cotra's gaze drops to the floor. Indeed.
What's wrong now, blue boy?
It's nothing, although... Notre extracts himself from the supplicating lizards, giving them quiet instructions to stay put for a moment. They chirp in obedient acknowledgement, watch along with Luke as the dragon returns to the table. Notre picks up the file folder he'd been flipping through before the interruption. Would you mind confirming something for me, Mr. Walker? He holds the folder out to the griffin.
Sure. What you need now?
I just read, and I think you'll understand.
All right.
When the dragon hands the documents over, Luke begins to flip through them.
Huh? What the hell is this?
Finding a lack of the coveted leftovers, a man must rise up to the challenge. After a makeshift snack for you and Asterion, you start work on the most divine of all foods, bread. Raise your finger over a heaping cup of flour to rid it of the excess. Less than a spoonful of salt, water and yeast mixed together to bring it back to life. Each ingredient is its rightful quantity in proper place. Mix it all, first uneven lumps, then half-mixed strings, sticky enough to form a web from index to thumb, firm enough to be plucked. Keep mixing, it'll stay between your fingers like a memory of the times when our ancestors had webbed hands. Sweat drips from your forehead, struggle with a towel to wipe it, leave a string of dough on it. Wait. Let the bread rise, knead it, grab its edges and fold it over itself 4, 8, 12, 16 times. Let it sleep inside a basin. It takes a while for the bread to rise enough to push off the lid, but surely enough the time comes. A sharp scent of alcohol shall rise. Need it. Feels it resists against your grasp and has been folded in on itself into a neat smooth ball, almost bursting at the seams. Knead and rest until it's ready, however many times it takes. There's something divine in all the stages of baking. The smoothness of flour, the diminutive heat of activated yeast, the eye-watering scent of alcoholic fermentation. Chief among them is the aroma of bread in the oven and the joy of sharing it. Look up. There's someone on the sofa. Your servant, roommate, business partner, dear guest. A man's mind in the body of a hybrid. There's something divine in the eyes. In yours, in his, in the eyes of mankind and all the beautiful human-like beasts with which our empire was built. It hasn't been long since you met this man called Asterion. The cadence of his voice, the reverence in his words, the shifts in his face. By now there may be familiarity. His moods are clearer in your mind's eye. At times you might even find yourself anticipating the next step of his dance. What a pagan ritual this is, cooking for the Minotaur of legend while he broods. His rough fingers graze and tap away at the tablet until he finds an issue he can't resolve. His posture goes rigid, and you know well to check on him. It happens every 20 minutes. It fits well with the dough's rest times. He's quiet now, more than when you left him. Whatever attempt at extracting some truth is met with a disoriented grunt. Give him time. Both of you have it in plenty after all. Go back to your pagan ritual of kneading dough for the brooding man. Be dutiful. There is something divine at play in cooking, in mankind's eyes and hands. Should fortune smile, you too will carry this divinity within yourself. Let time pass, eat and drink. Let the man rest. His heart dances to its own odd rhythm. Is this what you're after, I wonder? Why did you, master of masters, come to this sorry desert? Here the Lord may summon diamonds at his fingertips, but it's not why you're enticed to own this land. Perhaps this is what you're after, a realm where a man may conduct the pagan ritual of finding a kindred spirit. There is something divine in providing grace to an ailing soul, and so you must cook while he rests. You are the master, and for this silent afternoon he is your guest. Slave away at the oven, open the wine, pour its contents into your finest glass, call the man to feast even if his appetite is lacking. He eats in silence. You hum and tap your feet to a beat only God knows. You exchange glances and ponder how his eyes always seem too wet. Asterion's nostrils flare as he lets out all the old, stagnant air accumulated in his lungs. His shoulders drop as a shiver crawls up his spine, leaving a trail of hairs standing up. His chest thrums a bassy rumble, hooves scrape against the floor. You feel his voice 5 beats before it arrives. I don't have it in me to pretend anymore. What do you mean? I don't deserve any of this. The Minotaur looks through you, hazy eyes, tired and fearless. I'm afraid I don't get it. He parts his mouth and draws a breath. From your place across the dinner table you can hear a wheezing. He licks his lips, but the tongue is just as dry, cups his hands together and rubs them for warmth. Today his voice is not as high-strung as usual. Each syllable flows without rhythm or dance. I am a wretch, Leo, born and killed like one, sentenced by the gods for my cowardice. The Minotaur pinches his forearm and twists. He bites his cheek, deforming it inwards, then his jaw grows tense as he tests his own limits. When you left, I read on about me, my own story. Nothing I wasn't aware of, but it was interesting seeing it all laid bare. Would you care to hear it, all of it from the beast itself? The Minotaur draws another struggling breath. He pinches his forearm harder, twists it and locks his throat once more. A drop of sweat runs down his forehead to his chin, then drips to his clothes. His ears and tail flick back and forth as if hornets were floating around them. Between the two is only a short wooden table, about an arm's length. Its corners were once sharp, now they are blunted by age and wear. You ignore his question. Instead, more pressing matters come to the surface. His twisting of his arm, the wheezing from his throat, the death-black fear consuming him. He's at your arm's reach, but the distance is insurmountable, and his question whether or not he may proceed is the wrong one entirely. You nod and he begins. I was sentenced to this land because of my cowardice. I allowed a man to kill me. My mother lost herself during my birth. Bringing a monster to life is reason enough to lose half of one's own mind. I had siblings, too many to count, although as you may guess, my mother's body could not bear another after my birth. My guard, he was my friend, his name was Phronios. I was not allowed to work, but I made myself useful. My father, king and highest priest of our faith, would take my blood to bring fertility to the people's crops. In the stories I read about myself, they called me a cannibal. And here's the truth, Leo. Indeed, I was. One day my 3 sisters tricked me into eating beef. I am half bull after all. Doing so is just as much cannibalism as it would be eating a human. I had been taught to avoid it, but they deceived me. From that moment onwards, my life went to ruin. I was sent to the labyrinth where I lived out the rest of my days. It was punishment, yes, but also a safety against whatever fears they had. It was also a duty. I was sent there to tend to a temple and to keep a relic safe. I tended to the flame, Leo, for years. Only once did it go out. It was not out of negligence, though in retrospect I wish it was so. I killed a holy man. His son brought him to me in the hopes I could put him out of his misery, and I did, but that was an unforgivable crime. I was stained with it. I took a life that Zeus himself had marked as everlasting. What could I have done after that? But the man's son told me sweet words. A redeemer would come, he said. So I waited, and he did arrive. I gave my life. Cowardice is what it was branded as. Ignoble disgrace at best, for a prince to give his back to a blade with no valor fought. But in Hades I found peace. My brother Androgeos defended me, and the judges of the dead cleared me of all charges. I enjoyed 3 years of freedom in Hades, for I was kidnapped to this realm to serve the sentence the gods saw fit. For centuries the masters did as they pleased, until one saw fit to end my trials. I'm rotten, Leo. When I'm wounded, that's what leaves me. Rot and decay. I am dead. I know what will happen. You don't have to lie to yourself about who or what I am. Neither do you have to deceive me or prolong it, out of kindness. You will grow tired of me, as all do eventually. I do not have it in me to be a toy, talk to like a man. You have shown yourself to be kind, more than most masters. But I know that it's only a matter of time until you grow bored and see that it's foolish to take care of a slave for yourself. That anticipation, the tension, that I cannot bear. Pain, on the other hand, I have mastered. So please, let's end this charade. I cannot bear it any longer. Do as you please with me. You've come quite a way on your journey, kind master. Inherited an old treasure of humanity, investigated its inner workings, healed the keeper, overcame the snake's allure, welcomed wanderers both virtuous and unsightly. And yet, it did not cost you much. Your actions were small and unexceptional. You did not bleed or toil for it. But goodness does not always come of blood or sweat. Sometimes doing the decent thing when faced with infinite temptation is noteworthy enough to be heroic. Decisions. All the choices you have made led to this very moment where only one path is possible. Not because you lack the power, but because the shackles of right and wrong have taken hold. But will carrying that added weight not hold you back, but only give you the strength to heft it further? So rise, kind master, and reveal yourself. I'm afraid you misunderstand who I am. You are human. So are you. Haven't we discussed this before? What you're asking of me, I refuse to do it. It's not a matter of what I am, what a human is. It's about who I am. I've been kind to you, Asterion. We've not known each other for long, but I'm not just humouring you or making fun of you to call you my friend. Well, you want me to just end your doubt and hurt you. I don't know what previous masters might have done or how they acted, but for my part, I just don't have it in me. I won't hurt you. I don't say this as an act of kindness or charity. It's just who I am. So if I was to be firm with you about anything, it should be this. No, I won't. Maybe you're right in the sense that the pain I can inflict on you is more bearable than the distress you feel. But I'm not that man. I will not give up from what I believe is right. Being kind to you isn't a game. It's just basic. It's decent. It just is. Do you consider me a friend, Asterion? I realise this is a tricky question. The power I have over you is nothing short of absolute. But listen to what I said. I will not hurt you. This is not charity or mercy. It is the right thing, and I will stand by it even if I have to shackle myself to do it. His breath hitches at the mention of shackle. But I must ask a question. What we've gone through so far, was all of it a master and servant going through the motions? Or was it you and I, Asterion and Leo? The Minotaur blinks and feels the velvet around them the night before when they embraced. How he forgot the sound of his own footsteps. You told me about the hotel's mission, to give a place to those who have nowhere to go. I'm telling you right here, right now, unequivocally that I swear by it. I will hold on to the mission. And you don't have anywhere to go either, so this place should be a place for you too. I won't hurt you. The Minotaur's cheek deforms as he bites on it. He sinks his nails into his own forearm and drags them as if twisting his skin. He draws a breath. O Lord of Guests, he thinks, what devising sent this man to me? Fates, is he yet another trials devised to break me? Oh, Lady Hestia, have you taken pity on me one last time? Or was it your great earth-shattering Poseidon? Please give me a sign this is true and not yet another suffering I must endure. We can do this together. I must ask something of you. See me as myself, Leo, and not as master. Wasn't I telling you about making us into partners? What was it you told me? That the labyrinth would make it official? A few times you referred to this whole land as the labyrinth, right? I suppose that's what it was meant to be called. But I don't see much for labyrinth. This is clearly a hotel. That is the truth you built, and if there are contracts and laws beneath it, it won't stop being a hotel. So does it matter what it's called, what word we give it? Don't the facts take precedence? So fuck the labyrinth and its rules. We'll order the facts and that makes reality. We don't need a contract to make things work. We can just do it. Say you're my business partner. Go with it, and before long everyone will believe it. Because it's the truth. More of it than any piece of paper will ever be. If my word means something, if I can stick to my promise, then you can and will be my partner. The roaring, overpowering silence wrenches the Minotaur's heart, crushes his lungs and washes away anything Leo could say. He coughs but doesn't notice it. When he opens his eyes, you aren't supposed to cry this early. You haven't even heard my speech. We'll have all the time to catch up once I save you, little star. Now, don't worry. You made quite a mess, but I know you better than you know yourself. I'll show their excellencies just what kind of person you were and are. By the weight of my words and the value of my promises, it won't be long before we're walking away from here, my brother. Your Excellencies, may I begin? No, he did not cry. He did not anger the gods. He did not get shipped to 100 different labyrinths. And during that night when his guard visited, he did not reject his request. Forsake the labyrinth. We can worship the gods all the same, pay their due respect to our own hearth and build a shrine around it. If my words and promises ever carried weight, then come Asterion, and I'll take you as my brother. Yes. The Minotaur looks at you as if your face caught him off guard, just as reality itself roars back into his mind. He draws a breath, but this time he does not hitch. In fact, it overcomes all the stagnant air, a lungful so fresh it brings a wetness to one's eyes. I am sorry for my disrespect. I was inconsiderate during our conversation, Leo. There's no reason to be sorry. I'd appreciate it if you spoke to me with this frankness more often. I am afraid I can't take another conversation like this so soon, Leo. This has been the hardest thing I've done since... Let's not go there. Indeed, no reason to poke those old memories. I will need some time. That is no issue. We have all the time in the world, right? We do. I remember you mentioned I reminded you of a friend. Is that the Phronios fellow you talked about earlier? The Minotaur looks down to his hands. His right settles on top of the left and scratches it, his nails digging in as if trying to unearth his veins. Am I allowed to ask why I remind you of him? You are the master. Of course you are. Please stop that. I'm a person. Just treat me like one. None of this about orders this, master that. You don't want to answer, it's fine. That's the end of it. It's because of things like this that you remind me of him. He was my guard. That was his official role. But in truth, he was my friend and playmate first. He was assigned to me when we were both children. The way you talk, the things you speak, your disregard for hierarchy, the way you look at me. I've caught myself thinking as if you were him. If Phronios had been a master, would he have been like the others? Would he have harmed you? No. There's nothing in the world I am more certain about than that. Why are you so sure he wouldn't do it? He wasn't that kind of man. It had never crossed his mind. Asterion knocks his knuckles on the wooden table. He licks his lips, and this time his tongue leaves a sheen of saliva. His eyes alternate from looking at you to deliberate, drawn-out blinks. He draws a breath, then lays both of his hands on the table. He breathes out, and his arms inch in a bit further. It's such a small distance, no more than an arm's length. In fact, it's almost cramped if you had to contain yourself to a nook of the room. You raise your hand an inch off the table. It feels light, not at all awkward. The Minotaur gives it a brief glance, a deliberate blink, a long exhale. You lay it over his. The veins pop on the back of his hands. You could trace them with your fingers following the short fur's direction. It's cold and sweaty, but not badly so. Your warmth mustn't be unwelcome. In fact, the Minotaur closes his eyes, breathes in, out, and droops his shoulders. The touch lingers only for a short while. Time demands his due. You let it go for overstaying your welcome. Not long afterwards, the Minotaur retreats to his room. You refrain from interrupting his peace for as long as possible. For hours later, you remember Luke's offer to stargaze. Perhaps it would be for the best allowing Asterion some time alone. He doesn't have to go out if he doesn't want to. While you're dressing yourself, however, he comes out of his room. Are you going out? Yes, Luke invited us to some stargazing tonight, remember? You don't have to come if you don't want to. Oh yes, I was meaning to ask something about this. Would you, or perhaps Luke, mind if I brought my lyre along? I'm sure they'll all appreciate your songs. A night with friends. Indeed, I'll only need a minute to get ready. I'll wait for you. Before sunset, the Griffin took out a few chairs to the parking lot. The stars above sparkle like a vein of ore. Luke is bathed in red light from a series of battery-powered lamps he brought with him. He pores over the papers strewn on the table, both his notes and a roughed-up book as long as your arm. It's an atlas of the starry sky. The wind threatens to blow it away, but the Griffin uses a lamp as a weight. You saw him taking all of these things from his car's trunk. The Minotaur caresses his lyre. A sequence plucked, a plectrum grazing the strings, then shifting notes as he tunes it all. You and Coulter look at each other, then off to the side. The little lizards scamper around you. They approach to take a closer look, eyes glimmering in the dark. Little claws tick against whatever trinkets they pick to examine. Keychains, pens, empty beer cans being passed around for half a minute or being pushed back where they were. After the slightest movement, they run off a yard or two into the wilderness and hide behind a rock. They chitter like birds, then go silent until the tops of their heads pop up from the rock. You slip them a few treats, some grilled chicken bits, a tuna sandwich, a few apples. Their fingers are grubby and so thin. Could you enlighten me about exactly what they are? The answer is simple.
This guy's nothing like I've ever seen, Asterion.
The Minotaur looks up to the Griffin, blinks and returns his attention to his lyre. As I was saying, that's easy to answer. Years ago I heard of a playful breed of diminutive reptile-like beings said to live and toil underground. I've seen them a handful of times in my travels, mainly in the old world, and about a century or more ago. These boys have grown awfully scarce over the last decades. If memory serves me, they are called kobolds. Kobolds, like the metal? Indeed, I suppose it must relate to them being underground critters. A yard away from the four of you, the kobolds play fight on the ground. The chubby lizard crawls on all fours and charges towards the darkest kobold, who dodges and immobilizes him. The loser groans, not too different from a shrill moo. Chubby one splays himself on the ground like butchered cattle and plays dead. Over his corpse, the two other lizards, the dark and light one, wrestle. When one trips on the chubby boy, he quickly crawls away, then stays by the sidelines fidgeting and hugging himself. The dog bite wins, but a rematch follows. A cloud of dust rises, grunts and shrieks pierce it. The chubby boy groans something, but neither two listen to him. And are you sure they're safe to keep around? What if they're rabid? If I'm correct in my assessment, then yes, I'd say so. Some people see these little ones as pests, but they are diligent workers, assuming they are treated well. And I'll have you know they're quite resistant to just about any disease you can imagine. Plus they're cold-blooded, no chance they can get rabies. They are very hard to kill. I see. Just to be sure, what exactly does treating them well entail? Oh, they don't need much. Food, water, hole to sleep in. Shiny rocks and metals if you want to reward them. The shinier the better. They love variety. You can rely on them to work hard, although occasionally they may get distracted and goof off. I'll take a look. I'm sure they're about to pull something off. The kobold's wrestling match reaches its conclusion. You've seen the darker lizard one time and time again. This time the lighter one broke an ancient rule by pulling the other's tail. He straddles the loser and lets out a growl of victory, made throaty and ragged from the promise of violence lying underneath it. He's tired of the humiliation, time and time again losing, as a consequence being put through the disgrace of eating the greenest apples. The gods, how many times can a man be made to eat the burnt edge of a bread slice for losing his faith in justice and fairness? He pulls a weapon, a crumpled beer can. It is time for violence. The chubby kobold throws himself to stop him, snorting and shrieking as snot runs down his nose. But their fate is sealed. Cain and Abel cannot avoid the tragedy they are put in by God. In the last second, the darker kobold ponders about life. How there is no grand epiphany before one meets his end, no enlightenment. It all ends as abruptly as one's first memories begin. The lighter kobold brings the can down on the other's skull. It makes a dull thud, then bounces off a foot or two away. The loser lets out a dramatic wail, one filled with curses to demons and pleas to the gods, while the victor yells in maddened glory. The chubby one cries and grieves. The winner takes the spoils, the ripest apple, the thickest chicken bit, and the middle of the sandwich overflowing with tuna. What a sick, twisted world this is. The chubby boy can only wail, moan his characteristically shrill moo, and invoke the Furies to bring retribution. The victor lets out a final shriek of glory. Hold it, let it ring across the valley until it all dies down. The end. The three boys rise, hold each other's hands and celebrate. What a marvellous performance. The troupe bows as the invisible audience offers them a standing ovation. They are very playful, as you can see. Wouldn't you agree, Luke? What? The kobolds, aren't they the funniest thing you've ever seen? Yeah, sure, funny little rascals ate my lunch, but sure. You can't blame them, they're so thin. Who knows when they last had a proper meal? Uh-huh. The Griffin goes back to poring over his reddened papers. You get up to check how he's doing. There's a celestial atlas on the table. Its pages are thoroughly scribbled with very faint pencil marks. On the margins are lists of names and dates. So, Luke, how's it going? Are the stars good tonight? Absolutely, the night sky here is just incredible. Look for yourself. You ever seen stars so clear as this, Leo? Can't say I have. I think even the most secluded place I've ever visited was like this. Aye, not a drop of light pollution. We're near a city with buildings, homes, lampposts, what have you. That whole junk makes it hard to see the stars. Not a drop of that here. I don't recognise those stars at all. Not a single one of them. Except maybe. I see a string of stars reminds me of Hydra. It might just be a lookalike. I might have an answer to that, Luke. Did it cross your mind we might not be in the Northern Hemisphere? Perhaps that is all you're familiar with? It did, in fact. It ain't it. Still have you know I know my way around the Southern Celestial Hemisphere. There's one thing this bird brain here knows, it's the stars. As you may expect, there's no telephone or GPS signal here either. There's no way of knowing for sure where on Earth we are. But no place knows to have a sky like this. So many, hypotheses we aren't on Earth at all. Is this your first time facing something deeply supernatural, Luke? I thought you'd be more acquainted with such circumstances. Excuse me, I don't come from the mystical Far East, Mr. Dragon God. Why can't we don't have none of this shit? So why don't you enlighten us about what's going on then? Oh, well, you are coming at this from the wrong angle, you see. Magic isn't meant to be broken down with human science, Luke. It's just what it is. Sorry, Chief, that won't do it for me. I'm in love with this sky and I want to make it all mine. He looks up. The crown of stars over his head, one could forget the man's lecherous nature and crass jokes. For the night he carries well the majesty of America's bald eagle. Can you imagine if this whole place is on another planet? What this could mean for mankind? Maybe I could. I'd be such a pain in the ass. Maybe we could look into finding a star in common with the Earth sky. I don't even know where to start with that if I'm wrong about Hydra. Maybe if I... What are you doing, Luke? I'm mapping the sky, boss. I can't let this opportunity pass by. I was talking with Asterion a few nights ago and he told me no one mapped it out. At least he didn't think anyone did. So I'm doing it. You mind if I make up constellations and give them names? Well, if Asterion is fine with it, then so am I. I see. Well, in that case, I'll just be sure. It'd be okay if I named one after my brother? I don't see why not. Thanks. This is a dream come true, boss. Her brother, you say? That's right, Peter was his name. We used to stargaze as kids, and he'd come up with all the weirdest constellations you could imagine. Brother. Androgeos' hand covered the Minotaur's, a rough and callous mitt on top of his fingers, covered only by dust in the fur. For 2 weeks he taught his baby brother how to pull an arrow from a quiver, how to read its notch on the bowstring, how to pull it with the back and not the arms. Acquiring the strength to pull the string came easily to the growing calf. Asterion the step-wide back, that's what Androgeos called him, the archer's son. The dexterity to notch the arrows and aim eluded him, however. It was years before the young Hydra could let loose a proper sequence of arrows. One day Androgeos' teachings collapsed inwards. Perhaps something changed in the Minotaur's eyes, or a blessing took root in his hands. All he learned was made flesh, and from then on his progress was nothing short of prodigal. From that day onwards, once every week or so, their father would rise early to watch their practices. Have his undivided attention as target after target fell, until it all came to an end. Androgios, how short was our time together, and yet few left such an everlasting impression in me. If only I had remained in Hades.
Peter's such a cheeky son of a bitch. I even got a question wrong in the exam once, you know. There's no such thing as an Argos cottonation. There is an Argos Navi. And Bastard got that one right too. When I came out, he was laughing his ass off at me. Just knew from my face I'd gotten it wrong. In my defence, that one's from the southern hemisphere, so like back then I had a chance to see it for myself.
I see, so you had a good relationship then?
Hell yeah. How about you, Blue Boy? Got any siblings back wherever home is for you?
I did, once upon a time. A brother, red-scaled and more apt in the martial arts than I. I, on the other hand, found my aptitude in priesthood and scholarship. Still, we got along well with one another, like two halves of a whole, as the shrine priest would say. Indeed, we would have our disagreements and our arguments, but they never mattered much in the end. Onsen and I, The dragon loses himself in reminiscence for a moment, then a smile drops off of his face. Of course, circumstances made us go our separate ways in the end.
Oh. You know where he is? How he's doing?
Who knows? Androgios, I never asked if you liked the feathers. That night was much like this. I aimed my bow to a star, if somehow my arrow could reach it and set it loose. 3 times I fired an arrow and then it fell. Phronios and I prepared the fire, our sacrifice to you, feathers of a holy bird. As for Phronios, we had no common blood, but we were brothers just the same. That night we partied and drowned the embers with wine, and you told me to. Forsake the labyrinth. We can worship all the gods all the same, pay their due respect in our own hearth and build a shrine around it. Asterion, you can have your freedom if we build our faith. Asterion, are you listening? The Minotaur looks at the dragon, lips sealed as the words cut through his thoughts. He takes a swig from his wine bottle. Pardon me, what did you say? I was asking, do you have any siblings? Oh yes, brothers and sisters. Do you mind if I ask where they are now? They aren't around anymore. Quite a while since we last talked. I see. That's quite peculiar to me. I've travelled a lot, seen the world, and yet I've never seen a Minotaur with my own eyes. In fact, all myths and legends is why they believe that Minotaurs didn't exist, or at least don't anymore. Would you mind telling me your siblings' names? The Minotaur raises his eyes from the lyre. The Griffin and the Dragon had seen much of the labyrinth's mysteries by now. But he hadn't told them, neither did the Master, he assumed, about his true nature. Did the Dragon learn about it somehow? Phronios was my brother. Is that so? A very Greek name, just like yours. Is that a family tradition? It's our culture. A Greek culture, or perhaps it's close to...
I know it's my brother who first called me Luke. Did yours ever give you a nickname, Asterion?
Yes, he used to call me Little Star.
Little Star, huh? It's the name of a hymn my ma used to sing to me. Would you care to hear it?
If you'd like to share it, yes.
How wide you look, little star, away up yonder in the sky. How many years you twinkle there above the world so high. Little star away up yonder, tell me, were you shining then? Did you hear the angels sing in peace, goodwill to men? I often wonder if you were there when Christ lay in the stall, and if you saw from your dizzy height the infant Lord of all. If you had listened on that night, could you have heard the song that floated down on the midnight air from that angelic throng? Oh yes, a wise little star are you, yet not a word to say. You watch all night o'er the drowsy earth, and sleep all through the day. Pretty, huh?
Oh, might have been if I'd known the tune. Yes, it is nice. Now this little diversion is resolved. Leo, Asterion. Today Luke and I went down to the bedrock. That's where we found the kobolds. I hope you won't mind, but I looked over some of the contracts and documents stored there. What we found was... Yes, what you found is... Go on, say it. Now you know the truth. I am Asterion, the Minotaur. Yes, but what did you do to deserve this? I displeased the gods. That alone warrants punishment. You should know that well enough, considering your age and precedence. No, that's not even scratching the surface. There has to be more to the story. There are millions of mortals who went far beyond displeasing the gods they worship, and I cannot believe any received a punishment so severe as yours. Was it murder? Cannibalism? That is the legend, after all, that you... Cota, stop it. He doesn't want to talk about it. That I see. But we have a right to know what all this is about, and... Whatever it is he did, no matter how big or small, it's already been paid 100 times over. I suppose you are correct on that. Still, it's not to answer what exactly is going on here. For instance, you, Leo. If I understood correctly, your role in all this has been his torturer. There were rocky moments in our interactions, but in my brief time here I've seen no reason to question your morals. But please, you must understand, I cannot, will not, work in a place that tortures someone. There is no magic, no amount of gold, nothing to convince me to do it. So please, I must know what is going on here. Leo, look, I didn't want to bring it up tonight. I'm still freaked out and trying to get hold of it. I ain't sure he's saying like Cota did what I do. The hell, I'm with him here. I've done my fair share of fucked up stuff in my life. I'm no saint. That's all behind me now. I gotta know what this whole labyrinth thing is. So, now the cat's out of the bag, would you mind? You gather your thoughts. From that you received the deed to finding Asterion in the cold room and everything that came after. What an absurd story it is, and it's been less than 2 weeks since you arrived here. As you string the facts together, it becomes clear how absurd it is. The idea of having absolute power over this realm and Asterion is objectionable enough, even if you didn't misuse it. But still, you tell them your version up until finding Asterion in the cold room, which is when the Minotaur jumps in and begins corroborating the story, if not telling his own version. It doesn't take more than 15 minutes to get them to speed. Asterion, Leo, I don't know what to say. So that's why you looked different last night. But why didn't you tell us? The less people know it, the more I can just live. Ignore it all, enjoy what I have. It's only because you went to the valley and saw what it holds that I'm willing to speak. Regardless, that was a story I had no interest in ever sharing. Is there no way to set you free? There must be. If there was, I assume we'd have achieved it by now. Indeed. I am yet to see a hint of a way out. Luke turns back to his celestial maps, but gazes instead at his feet. Cota looks off to the road and runs a hand over his beard. Asterion draws a breath, holds it, lets it out in a hoarse wheeze. Even the kobolds interrupted their roughhousing. Now they sit by a rock a few feet away and watch Asterion. None of them directs as much as a glance towards you. Their presence bears on you regardless. You are the boss, after all. If anyone has the legitimacy to speak and take the reins, it's you. The events from this afternoon are still fresh. That's a good start. Regardless of whether or not there's one, I can do my part. We were talking earlier today about it. For all intents and purposes, Asterion is my business partner. We work together, make decisions after consulting each other, even live under the same roof. Asterion said there's no way I can make that official here, and indeed the labyrinth may have its contracts and laws. It may stop me from signing a document about it. But we don't need paperwork for this. The truth speaks for itself. If we all acknowledge the fact that Asterion and I are equal partners, if everyone knows it, then that's the truth. And you can make me accountable for it, right? Now that you know the truth about the valley, what will you do if I ever send Asterion out again? Well, that's not right. We'd stop you. That's right. If you didn't outright restrain me, you could disobey me by, let's say, going on a strike. None of you have to trust me to do the right thing out of the goodness of my heart. You can stop or pressure me.
If we keep this up for long enough, for the decades I'll be the hotel's manager, then when the next one comes around, he won't have a choice either, will he? Everyone will expect Asterion to be treated as a partner. That's all they'll have ever known. All these restraints will pass on to him. People will demand it. We can't know for sure what the future holds. This could be enough to keep you safe, Asterion. It might even be a deterrent against other people like Clement in the future. I'm not sure that will resolve all forms of future issues, but regardless, it sounds like a good idea. Yeah, it does sound good, but if someone wanted to do something fucked up, it wouldn't really stop them. I mean, even you. If you want to do something bad, you could still do it behind closed doors. Hell, if Code and I aren't paying attention, you could still send Asterion out to the creepy valley. Asterion, is there a way you could use some of the hotel's magic to deal with this? Could there be something you could use? The contract also has a non-aggression clause. I shall not hurt you, you shall not hurt me. It is a self-enforcing agreement. We'll both find ourselves unable to break it. The laws here, you see, apply themselves. Contracts are very powerful. On the off chance whether somehow breaks one of the terms, then our pact is terminated. I lose the powers bequeathed to me, and your hotel's hearth will go out. The trinket reverts back to my ownership. It's a most fair agreement, I'd say. I have an idea, but I'm not sure it can work. Asterion, I recall you saying I can't forbid myself from sending you out, but I was thinking. The contract Argos proposed, if I recall, it says something along the lines of Heste's mirror reverting to his ownership if certain conditions are met, like me hurting him. If I hurt him, then something I dislike happens. Couldn't we apply the same principle here? A simple request, really. If a condition is realised, an unpleasant consequence is triggered. Too many such contracts have been crafted over the millennia, so much so there are dozens at the bedrock. And yet, few if any to restrict the all-powerful master. There's one contract he could use, one the Minotaur is well acquainted with. Yet his neck bristles, he grits his teeth and bites his tongue. What hubris to even consider putting a master through such infamy? Or a friend, for that matter. There's no way anyone would accept it. Leo will refuse. But then, at least, the Minotaur will be able to breathe free of doubt. The charade will be over. There is something we can do, but I'm afraid you won't like it, my lord. I'm aware of an old contract that can create a pair of linked artifacts. It's been used a few times by lords past. What's it do? Are you sure this is what you want? Would you really go as far as restricting yourself to accomplish this? The contract creates two armbands, one in the form of a laurel wreath, one in a simple ring of lead. We establish clauses, the conditions which we wish to stop from ever coming true. Let's say we intend to stop you from ever sending me to the valley. Then you would don the lead ring, I would take the laurel wreath, and we sign the contract with two eyewitnesses. Then it would stop me from doing it. Strictly speaking, no. What it would do is inflict a punishment on you if it ever came true. What's the punishment? It would amputate your arm. That's quite a punishment. It is. The lead ring cannot be removed either, unless the contract is revoked with the consent of both parties and all eyewitnesses. But if you want to prove to me that you have no ill will, then this is your chance. I can get the contract now, tonight. I already know the terms I'd want. Okay, what do you have in mind? That I shall not be forced or coerced to go to the valley. That is all I want. If you are telling the truth, if you don't want to bring me harm and wish to realize the hotel's mission, then this condition should not be controversial. I have no business in the valley. For centuries before Clement I never had a reason to go there, and no master saw a reason to either. This clause does not specify who forces or coerces me to go to the valley, mind you. If this term is signed, then it will be in your best interest to protect me from anyone who would.
I don't want you to be harmed either. You're being a good master, so you can expect me to defend you from any who'd so much as try to force you. What you said tonight is true. If you truly want to make me your business partner, this is the one thing that will convince me once and for all. I want to never go to the valley again. That's all I want. Give me this one thing and I will follow you, not because you are my master, but because then I'll know that you meant all you said.
Yeah, let's do this. Prepare the contract.
4 shadows bathed in red light, huddled around a table overlooked by the starry sky. A dry, thick piece of parchment, a handwritten scroll, clauses and terms muttered between bouts of coughing, ideas growing like spider webs until touching and being woven together. The Minotaur draws a script you're unfamiliar with, something more ancient than the very alphabet. It slurs, fades in and out, then rebuilds itself into words and sentences. Each paragraph bound and latched onto each other, each clause cut open, studied and put back together a dozen times. Until it becomes a frightful web of cause and consequence. Should Asterion ever go to the valley as the result of force or coercion, you'll meet a grisly fate. Sweat drips from the Minotaur's forehead. He wipes it with a shaking hand, looks over to you, then averts his gaze. The first draft is done. It's left to sleep and age as all of you look up at the stars and share a moment of silence. Notre rubs his temples as he strains to catch sentences amidst the red light. Luke looks at the stars. His concentration is gone. The kobolds are folding a few pieces of paper. You and Asterion stand a foot away from each other. You look away, the moment lingering, before gazing into each other's eyes. Then the moon, the stars, and finally the Minotaur's hands. We turn to the contract, read it aloud, weigh every word against each other, each part's burden and boon. Then start anew, a fresh parchment to paint the picture again, this time with a comma here, a period there. Such a human thing, to provide precision in every sentence. Gods back in their time could not care about the pains and sorrows of mortal men. Whatever promises the Olympians made were vague and careless. But humans have so much to lose and little to gain. Even this undying Minotaur, man in all but shape. But you, good master, what brought you to this ugly land, this empty and abandoned hotel? There are dark and auspicious paths you could have wended, and ones of great glory too. This is where you are, however. We, sitting at the sidelines, can only hope it was this moment you sought. Would it be excessive of us to assume you came here to undo the hybrid shackles? What an odd master you are. Hundreds came before, but none were so foolish as to do what you are about to. Humanity is peculiar indeed. Forgive us if we wander, but the question gnaws. Did mankind change with the times? Or are you perhaps a rare, fine specimen? The Minotaur stirs. It's time, our good lord. The contract is ready, Leo. Notre steps forward and reads the contract out loud. By the will of the Labyrinth's master, this binding contract is established to enforce its contents upon the world and its people. Hereby the master commands into existence 2 linked objects. A lead ring to fit around a man's bicep and a laurel wreath as wide as the prisoner's arms. These 2 objects shall be linked in cause and effect, as will their wearers. Whoever dons the lead ring will find it impossible to be removed, except through the revoking of this contract. Whoever first dons the laurel wreath shall become its permanent and unchangeable owner. If the owner of the laurel wreath is ever made to go to the Labyrinth's valley, either by coercion, command, or forcing, then the lead ring shall constrict and close as to amputate its bearer's arm. By the master's will, this contract may only be revoked if all its parties, bearer of the lead ring, owner of the laurel wreath, the 2 eyewitnesses present during its signing, consent to it. Such is the master's will. Master, is this truly what you want? Yes, I told you earlier today, and I meant it, Asterion. Did you expect me to go back on my word now that we're putting consequences on the table? Yes, I did.
Oh, I could not imagine a master accepting conditions so absurd. I suppose you're wrong then. There's no reason to feel bad. Sometimes that's a good thing. You take the pen and sign the contract. The contract shudders in your hand. Its paper turns thicker, almost leathery in texture. The two rings materialize on the table. Asterion takes the lead one, you take the laurel wreath, and you turn to each other. Asterion, I promise not to send you to the valley under any circumstances, and I swear I'll protect you from any who'd attempt to. I swear by my arm, knowing well the consequences of breaking my word. But I do this with my mind at peace. There's no reason why I would ever transgress this rule. I promise to be the good master you and this hotel deserve. Master Leo, your kindness and piety are unmatched. This contract asks nothing of me. Regardless, I offer my binding word in your favour. I promise to protect you, as is my duty, and to keep away from this land any who would threaten you by means of our oath. I swear that I'll do everything possible, within or without my reach, so that you will never regret your mercy. Well then now. Excuse me, Cota, there's something I'd like to add. Indeed, Asterion, the contract asks nothing of you, which is why I'll require one thing now. I do not care to register this in paperwork, or if it can be made into a contract in the first place. Still, I want you to fulfill this simple request. What is it, my lord? Effective now, you'll accept your place as my business partner, and from now on you will call me by my name. Yes, Leo, I will. I will accept your request. If there are no more objections, then, Asterion, Leo. You extend your left arm and the Minotaur gingerly slides the ring until it fits around your bicep. It does not, however, constrict or bother. It feels like it's barely grazing your skin, even if it's firm and unmoving. The Minotaur extends his arm and you do the same. Slide the laurel wreath with its leaves caressing Asterion's fur until it fits around his bicep. It's done, good master, your little ceremony, this peculiar rite. It binds you to ease the prisoner's load. What an odd pair. Those rings befit you, and what a gallant ceremony. And now, you may kiss the bride. And now, you open your mouth to spoil the moment, you uncouth peasant. Always. Something tugs on your pants. The little guy glares at you, a good foot of distance away, then shoots out with his arm to offer you something. It's a little paper rose. You only have the time to grasp it before he runs off to hide behind a rock. Oh, Leo, he wanted to give you a gift. I guess you're right, they can be cute. Of course I'm right. Why did you ever doubt me? The two go on to bicker as their wont. You watch with Asterion by your side. The both of you bathe in the red lamplight from below and the moonlight's white from above. Behind stands the hotel, tall and kingly, a wall between you and the horrible valley. Asterion's arm is warm against yours. This time there's no frightened recoiling or tense shuddering. The wind rushes past and around you, and this time the both of you lean together. Who is it that began it, you cannot tell. Leo, wouldn't you say this calls for a drink? Yes, but Luke only brought his watered-down beer. We could share a bottle of wine back at the hotel. I would enjoy that. It would make for a memorable end to this night. Such a tiny ember, but its heart beats red nonetheless. The two of you return home, bumping shoulders as you go. That night the Minotaur is welcomed in a restful slumber, and the following day, for the first time since the Second World War, he allows himself a day of uneventful peace. As we turn to Hades and the courthouse, now we're going to end things here. That actually took quite a bit longer than I expected to do. So we'll pick this up again sometime. Let's just save this one here.
So I hope you enjoyed that one. It's very interesting where we're going with this. So that was Minotaur Hotel. Next week is probably going to be Tennis Ace. And we will have a little extra thing just coming up. A few people have been asking me about the various dog noises, and you may have actually heard some earlier on in this recording, as my puppy was enjoying himself chewing on some stuff. So I managed to get some rather rough footage of both my dogs earlier on. So we're going to end the video with that. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.